So this is my Far Cry 6 review slash rambling. Um, just to kind of get started, there will be spoilers and discussion about the game story. So if you haven't played it and you're planning on doing it, probably start watching it now. Maybe you want to start watching anyway, but really to get it started, uh, this game's more of an evolution rather than like a revolution of the formula. It is very similar to the past couple of games. From my perspective in particular, though, I haven't played Far Cry since Far Cry 4, I think. And there's been like 3 games or so since. You've had like Primal, the Far Cry 4 DLCs as well, Far Cry 5, and then New Dawn. And as well as like Far Cry 5's 3 DLCs as well. So, I mean, the formula hasn't changed much since 3. And 3 came out like 10 years ago. So, if you're, first thing I'd say to begin with is like if you're sick of the formula, not much has really changed here. But if you've had a break from for a while, as I have, since I haven't played since 4, you may still find some value in it. Yeah, so just really to start, like I'd say I enjoyed this game a lot more than some of the other recent Ubisoft games. In particular, Assassin's Creed Valhalla. I didn't have like a particularly positive opinion about that. But I'll start off really with the graphics anyway. I mean, the game is quite a massive. It's quite a big, massive map. You've got it split into about 3 main regions, plus the starter island, and then kind of your final end game island. Well, not island, city. So you've got like a decent bit of variety in the environments. So I think the east area is more like jungle, mucky, muddy terrain, and then the west area is more like made up of smaller islands or broken up with quite a bit of water. There's a decent amount of traversal by boat around that west area, and then the middle bit's more like mountainous, like a mountainous region. And then obviously the starter islands kind of it's kind of more like a countryside area, I'd say. And then up north in the city, yeah, it's a city. So yeah, the map visually, I mean, you're seeing quite a, well, it's a gradual change, but there's quite a difference in the terrain as you progress throughout the game. It is probably the thing that grabbed my attention to the game and made me actually want to play it compared to maybe 5, which I thought the setting was a wee bit duller. It's just kind of set in the like an American countryside, whereas this is a bit more exotic. It kind of reminds me more of 3's, which is probably still, well, this or 3's is probably visually my favorite setting. But yeah, I mean, fidelity wise, so you've got like the game running on quite an old engine. I think it's called the Dunia engine. It was originally, I think, made by, well, Far Cry 1 was made by Crytek, and then Ubisoft took it over. So it's kind of like a modification of a very old engine, and it doesn't seem to have changed much since, well, from what I've seen of 5 online, but I'm sure people could kind of tell you play the previous games. And the main difference would be it's more like saturated and colorful, but it is, visually it's almost identical to 5. It is a cross-gen game as well. The good thing though is in the new consoles it's 60 frames per second, and it's quite good at holding it. The only thing is that you get quite a bit of screen turn, particularly in some of the busier areas. Speaking of which, actually, the busier areas, like this is the first time they've ever really had a city in a Far Cry game, which is kind of impressive. But the only thing is that this, actually navigating around that city is a bit of a mess. It's these quite linear controlled paths. It's not very open. You can funnel down a certain path, and if you're trying to find a collectible in a certain area, you may go down one path and find out it doesn't actually lead to that particular collectible, and you're going to have to go down back around these tunnels and the alleyways back out, and then find a new location to traverse through the middle of that city to reach the collectible. It can be a wee bit confusing. But I suppose the real other thing with the engine, it has nice water effects and fire effects, and destruction as well. I was kind of surprised, you see Battlefield 2042, it's really toned it down, but this game has surprisingly quite a bit. Maybe they're trying to capture some of that Far Cry 2 type of interactivity with the world. You can knock down quite a lot of the trees, and it's not just the small ones either. They just kind of fall over. You can damage them and they can fall over and collapse. Then obviously you can start those big fires that you could in the previous games. Probably not as big as 2, from what I've seen of it, but it is quite impressive, at least compared to Battlefield and stuff at the minute. When your guns can damage a range of objects as well, so it doesn't feel like a set really, so you feel like you're actually in that world and taking part in it and interacting with it. If you shoot a cop and it smashes into pieces, does add a wee bit to the game. That's probably that type of thing that you see in some people do wee details or videos about the details in previous games, comparing GTA 4 to GTA 5, the wee details they have, but they have some nice touches in this one. The weather effects is really the other thing's quite good. Obviously when it rains and stuff, you can see nice puddles and reflections as well. And then just as I was saying about the saturation, so it's nice having that tropical island, and you've got that kind of light blue appearance to the water and stuff that would be coming in, that brighter grass and greenery and stuff as well. The other thing that Ubisoft are actually quite good at visually is just obviously all their other ones really, they have day and night cycles, and they're quite good at doing the golden hour time, so sunset and sunrise, as you can actually see right here. It's always quite beautiful just looking out to the ocean and seeing kind of that orange glow as the sun's setting. You're seeing the palm trees blow in the wind as well. I think it is quite scenic. Probably the negatives with the graphics is that I think some of the animations can look a bit wooden, particularly on the characters. I think the main villain is acted by Giancarlo Esposito, so you're a person from Breaking Bad and The Boys, etc. And obviously they've just scanned his face, I assume, but sometimes the way they move around, it can look a bit like robots. I don't think it's maybe their animation isn't advanced as some other games, and then some of the other character models don't always look that spectacular, but that would probably be one of the main negatives of it. As for the rest of it, the draw distance is really good as well. I mean, you can see the city from probably around the middle of the map. The map is quite big, so you're seeing off in the distance that main hotel and some of the city lights. It is quite well done, the level of detail on it, and stuff doesn't always, I don't think the pop in or anything is that noticeable. And then sound, I think I was told about stuff if you're wearing flip-flops, you can hear that initial bit where your foot's hitting off the ground, and then the second bit where the flip flop's actually slapping off the back of your heel. I mean, it seems like they've put a lot of detail in it, and you can definitely hear, as you go from different terrains, if you go from grass to ground to, or across the tarmac to the inside of the building. There was a definite change in the sound. And it didn't really have that tinny effect that Assassin's Creed Valhalla had. I thought it sounded pretty good, and all the weapons sound okay as well. Apart from maybe suppressors, it's not like a great punchy sound other than some of the snipers, really. And then you have decent music as well. Got nice little like tones when you capture a checkpoint, I think it is. They play that wee like soundbite just as the flag changes from the enemies to the gorillas. I mean, the next bit is really the story, but I probably won't spend too long on that. The bulk of your game is really just going around having fun in the sandbox, really. It's kind of follows the same formula as the previous games. You've got a charismatic villain played by, in this case, like a celebrity or a well-known actor. It's been, as in the shows that I was saying previously, in Star Wars, Mandalorian as well. It's kind of follows the structure of the Ghost Recon Wildlands game, where you've got different regions and each one's got a different villain that's set up in that area who controls it, and you work with the local guerrillas who aren't necessarily part of your team, but you're trying to recruit them or build like a relationship with that certain group so that they'll join your fight, really, together, instead of you standing divided. I mean, I don't think they care too much about the story, because it seems to be more focused just on the co-op. A lot of people skip cutscenes and stuff in co-op. The example I would use is if you're going to do a main mission, a lot of them, it's almost like a Destiny screen, so you go up to the person you want to talk to, and instead of speaking to them in the world, it brings up like their character model with a lot of text beside them, on like a bluish background, and you can read the text about the summary of what you're doing in this mission, and then they kind of animate and talk you through, have a few quotes, and then you just get on with things. It doesn't seem like they care a lot about the story in each of the missions. I think there is some nice bits where you go through learning about the history of the previous revolution, what happened there, and why they did turn on the previous generation of Castillos, what might have went wrong as well, and how the current villain's trying to rewrite history since he's currently leading the country. You meet some nice characters along the way, like El Tigre, and then you've got some decent annoying villains, like our side villains like McKay, and of course the main villain, Anton Castillo with his son. They have an interesting dynamic, and Diego doesn't necessarily want to be here, but he feels just kind of trapped. His father finds him wherever really he goes, and his father wants him to inherit his presidency once he does pass on. Spoilers, like the main villain's dying of cancer through the game, and a lot of the main plot is why they've revolted is that he's found a cure for cancer through the tobacco, I think, but it's also quite poisonous as well to the workers, well, the ways they're making it. And he basically enslaves a lot of the outcasts or poor people in their country, which is called Yara, to work for him on farms. A lot of them, and tests on them as well, just so he can produce this cure for cancer. But he himself is slowly dying from it. I mean, I think they make that point so that it makes him less like one-dimensional. But I don't know if, with previous villains like Pagan Min, maybe you understand some of where he's coming from. If he talks about if it was the rebels in charge, people might be worse off. But then with him in charge, but in this case, Anton just seems like a pretty bad guy. And then you meet, amigos along the way. Probably just for time purposes, I'll move on to the gameplay. I mean, the story's kind of, you do meet some interesting characters, but it mainly it's just like a bit of flavour to the destruction you're causing across the island. And they briefly kind of mentioned that, right, your main character, he has more personality in the previous games, but they briefly mentioned about what they try to spin the 3 story into, where your main character is enjoying the destruction around him and kind of addicted to it. But when you hear him talk and stuff, you don't really get that vibe. It sounds like he does generally believe that Anton's evil, and kind of the event at the start is a moment for him that makes him reevaluate and want to stay and fight rather than to move away and just get away from everything in Yara. Moving on to gameplay, first thing, since it's a shooter, would be the controls on console. They're actually not too bad. Controls quite well for an open world shooter. To me, it's a bit better than Battlefield at its launch. The only thing really I'd say is adjusting the sensitivity. I don't know why, but it goes up to like 1,000. I don't think anyone would be using more than like 300 in the sensitivity. You can't like fine tune it in console. It jumps up by like 30 to 60 and it changes as you go higher and higher up. But it does control well enough. It's just a wee bit floaty. It's always, I don't think it's one of the best controlling shooters on console, but they do have some nice features, like one of the you get a backpack on the game called the Supremo, and one of them lets you do like a side dodge similar to, I think, the new Doom. But yeah, you have decent hit feedback and stuff as well. Nice crunching noise when you get like headshots and stuff. But yeah, feeling wise, as I said, it's decent, but it's not top of the genre. The structure of it really is that you gradually progress through each region and take it over. So each region's held by that certain main villain, certain side villain. And in each region you've got like checkpoints, outposts, and anti-aircraft sites that you can just take over so that you have more tools to navigate the world. So if you take down checkpoints, you can drive cars through safely, since enemy checkpoints will have like spike traps that'll blow out your tires, and anti-aircraft sites allows you to glide through the air from or to take helicopters and planes as well. And then you have the outposts, which just give you like a fast travel point, and they give you resources as well. If you're fed up with the usual routine of these Ubisoft games of just taking over checkpoints or outposts, and then working your way to the main villain, you probably get fed up with this as well. But since as I said last time, I played like a shooter Ubisoft game, was probably Far Cry 4 4. And well, played Division actually, so Division 2 and Ghost Recon, but it's been a while since I played a Far Cry game, so that kind of, if I've heard people describe it, their gameplay kind of like as a fast food where there's not a lot of substance to it, but if you want something quick that you can get a bit of enjoyment out of, this is the type of game for you, as long as you're not fed up with it really. Then you got other missions where there's ambushes, convoys, and supply drops. Supply drops are probably the only kind of unique thing. Generally you head to like a radio on a certain point, and you have 3 minutes to reach a certain supply drop, and then you acquire resources from it. The only thing is generally it's not, the time's generous. Generally you get there quite early. Other side content includes like Yara stories, so you meet someone in Yara who is and then have a couple of missions as part of a quest line. I don't think that many of them kind of stood out to me. The ones, the missions that did were probably some of the treasure hunts. You've got one that's like a haunted mansion, and you have to kind of do some like puzzle solving. It's a wee bit creepy as well. It's just a completely different tone from the rest of the game, makes it very unique. And then another one where it's slight puzzle solving again, but it's I think it's someone's quinceañera, and they've left a surprise at the end, which is, I think it's a unicorn in that one, I think. It's got that Far Cry tone, a lot of the side content where it's a bit wacky out there, but it's quite decent anyway. Yeah, and then you have the graveyard mission as well, where someone's pretending to be a ghost and scare people off, and some of it is decent. There's a bit more to it than normal. The other thing is that you've got a bunch of collectibles throughout the world, so you've got like relics, caches, F&D caches, which are guns, gorilla caches, which is like your armor, roosters for the rooster side game, which got a lot of abuse, and then USB songs and spray cans, USB songs for your radio, and then spray cans for your customizing like camo and stuff. I mean, it's kind of like Ubisoft, they throw everything in the kitchen sink at you. Anything that was in the previous games gets brought over here. So the main change from the old ones is that you've now got a Supremo, which is kind of like an ultimate that you can use every so often, and there's about 6 different variations of it. I don't really care too much about ultimates. It's just like an easy win ability. Causes a lot of destruction for a second, but it doesn't do anything really too interesting. And then you've got resolver weapons, which just seems like they carry that over from Far Cry New Dawn. It just seems like Ubisoft just doesn't really cut content. One of the biggest changes is probably the ammo system. So you have to go up to a workbench, and then for your gun you choose the type of ammo you want. So there's armor piercing soft target rounds, poison rounds, and then explosive rounds, and then incendiary rounds. So depending on what ammo type you've got, and then the armor type of the enemy, may do less or more damage. It's kind of like Mass Effect 2's ammo system, but it's not convenient because you can't pick it on the fly. You have to go to a workbench just to choose it specifically. It's a decent idea though, but it's just not really executed well. I mean, the only thing is that I've heard a lot of complaints about enemies being bullet sponges, but I think if an enemy has a helmet on it but its face is still exposed, as long as you shoot the face, it's still going to be a one-hit kill. Obviously if you've got soft target rounds and the enemy's fully covered, then yeah, it is going to feel like there are bullet sponges, but generally you've got a couple of weapons equipped anyway in one go, so I would just have one that is armor piercing at all times. the other ones, like the poison rounds, didn't seem that useful. It turns enemies against each other, but it's just as quick shooting them yourself. And then incendiary, I didn't actually really touch that, but it's good for exploding enemies with flamethrowers, etc. I think, from what I remember. And then well, for the weapons as well, you've got a lot of different attachments. You earn the resources for the attachments by opening caches, and then trading like animal skins into vendors. So, you know, if you're going out hunting or fishing, you'll get materials, and then you trade that material in for like weapon parts, basically, or components of a weapon part. And then you go to a workbench and then build that specific part. I mean, the crafting's fine. The nice thing about it is that it seems to carry over the attachments you make for that weapon class. So there might be 8 different weapons in a weapon class, but if you craft a certain suppressor for an MP5, then all SMGs will have that certain suppressor, which is nice and convenient. And there's quite a lot of attachments as well. I mean, I'm probably more largely positive about the gameplay. It's just the fact that it's more of the same, and I can see why a lot of people are just sick of it, and it's just repetitive. I didn't really enjoy the fishing in it, but it's there. I mean, it's kind of, as I say, Ubisoft just give you the option to do stuff, even if it doesn't seem that necessary. You know, they've got plenty of vehicles as well. You've got air vehicles like planes, helicopters. Planes themselves didn't seem too useful. Helicopters were useful enough, but not overpowered, because you still had to clear out the anti-air sites before you could use them. And you've got sea vehicles, so they're useful for getting around the west side of the map a lot of the time. But and then you've got land vehicles where you can customize some more, add weapons and all that. So you can throw out mines and shoot bombs or like flamethrowers as well. But I didn't find the vehicle combat to be that great, so I didn't really use it at all, to be honest. Another thing they have is the guerrilla outpost, so you collect other resources like medicine, gasoline and stuff to build up your outpost, but it's nothing like Fallout 4 where you get almost complete control of what it is. This you can only pick from 6 different types of stores, and you choose what 2 you want to build. And there's only 3 guerrilla controlled outposts that you can build at, so I mean, you're just going to build 6 that they've given you, just do 2 at each different outpost. At those outposts you can send off people that you've recruited, you know, like hostages you've rescued, out to do certain missions. You kind of choose your own adventure things where they give you a certain path, and then the risks, and then the success percentage, and then you choose what you want to do, in hopes that you get a reward at the end of it. Yeah, so to me that kind of follows Ubisoft's design philosophy of there must be a reason for, or a reward for doing a certain activity. So, you know, in this case it's those random hostages that you see in the old games. Now you've got something to do with them, and once you recruit them you can send them off on missions just for more resources for building your camp. But it's not really compelling gameplay. I think I'm probably talking off the game, but yeah, I mean, there's certainly a lot to it. Like, there's an exhaustive list of features and content, but it was a good game, but it just really depends on whether you're just sick and tired of the formula. To me, it feels like you do progress more in this game than you do in some of the Assassin's Creed games, where you can spend hours on it and you haven't completed a region, whereas this, you know, it doesn't take too long to complete a region and make a dent in it. So, I mean, I'd say it was a decent game. It's probably like a middle of the, pack compared to the other games I've played at the minute. But yeah, that's really it.